Thank you for everybody online for tuning in as well. Here we have our host, Vivian Kaye, who will be moderating our discussion today, and I'll let her take the lead.
Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good? Good. You're good no matter what, okay? All right. Well, let's get started. And I'm just going to have everyone introduce themselves, or quickly introduce themselves. So I'll start with you, Sabaa. And wait, and where you're from.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I'm Sabaa Quao. My parents are from Ghana and Nigeria. And I'm Chief Creative Officer of Cossette, which is Canada's largest marketing and advertising agency. And I'm also co-founder of Wealthie.Works Daily, which is a fintech company.
Okay, thank you.
All righty, everyone. My name is Tseli Moshabesha. Oh, yeah. My name is Tseli Moshabesha. I currently work as a manager in transformation delivery services at KPMG, which means that I work on large-scale tech implementations. Part of that, I'm a partnerships person. Partnerships and communication and branding is what I'm about. I'm from Lesotho.
Okay.
Is there another question I'm missing?
No, that's it.
I'm from Lesotho. I live in Montreal. Came here just for BLAXPO. That's it.
Welcome. Bienvenue.
Awesome. Hello. Yep. Okay, perfect. Mic check, mic check. Hello, everyone. My name is Muna. I am a proud East African Somali woman. So do we have any East Africans in the house? Hello. Come on, make some noise. Make some noise. You know we're loud. I am a director and a COO, Chief Operating Officer, at Hover. It's a rideshare company focused on fair, transparent, and equitable for riders and drivers. We pay our drivers 100% of the fare. We launched May 2nd, so we are in Toronto, which means I hope everybody took a Hover. You do have 20% off with BLAXPO 2024 coupon, so make sure you get from your places to your homes taking a Hover. And make sure you support your local drivers. I'll probably speak a lot more about Hover, including with everything regarding this topic, so I won't be shying away from that.
No worries.
Sure.
Well, and let me introduce myself. I'm Vivian Kaye. I'm originally from Ghana and Togo. I'm an entrepreneur, empowerment expert, digital personality. I do all the things. And I'd like to welcome you to the Voices of the Diaspora live podcast recording. And we are going to talk all things, is it diaspora? I don't know. Potato, fufu, I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to ask questions, and I'm not going to ask anyone in particular because I want this to be more of a free-flowing conversation. And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. But the first question I'm going to ask is, what unique strengths do African voices bring to the global conversations around leadership and innovation? Sabaa, you look like you want to say something.
So if I think of the advantages I have being African, it's interesting how easily we embrace complexity. We all come from countries where things don't necessarily work in a predictable and linear way. And if you think of the world today, that chaos, unpredictability, non-linear, we're all built to manage that well.
Chaos. That's great. I always say whenever I fiend for chaos, I go to Ghana, and whenever I'm ready for law and order, I come back to Canada. So, what about you, Muna?
Well, for one, in terms of leadership, being an African woman myself, I believe being an African in general is, for one, being a leader. And we do bring a lot of creativity. We bring power, right? Right now, if you look at our House of Commons here, the leaders that are on there, Mr. Ahmed Hussein, Somali leader, and the Liberal Party. We've got the Speaker of the House, who is a person of color himself, Mr. Greg, who's also a good friend of mine. Shout out to him, as well as Mr. Matthews. So we do have a lot of powerful voices of people of color in our communities. And as you guys already know, and you're listening to, one of the most dynamically popular music genres right now is Afrobeats.
Hey!
So we add a lot of value to that. And there's another young Dr. Jamari from Nigeria, who is an aspiring neurosurgeon currently as we speak, who created the African black skin anatomy. I'm sure you guys have seen it. There's a widespread recognition that he's received. So the African Voices carries a lot of weight, and I'm very, very proud to be in the scene, and hopefully we can add to that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. You're going to have to teach me to pronounce your name. And you know what? And everyone knows this. If you have a name that people tend to mispronounce, always correct them. Always
I couldn't
correct
agree
them.
more.
If they can pronounce Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo and Tchaikovsky, I don't know if I'm even doing that one right, but I'm always a big fan of correcting people. So please teach me how to say your name again.
So it's pronounced TD.
TD.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's like at the beginning,
C.
and then the L is pronounced like a D.
Okay, so it's CD.
Exactly.
Okay, I have a follow-up question for you.
Cool.
Can you share a specific example of how your cultural background influenced a leadership decision that you've made? Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, I think for me, one of the things I really pull from my culture is, and I think most African cultures and in that diaspora cultures is people coming together. Mm-hmm. So I think that for me, I'm someone that in any leadership role, I'm trying to think of, so for example, I started the Concordia Black Alumni Association. Okay. And that was a call to, the amount of time I spent, I feel like what enriched my experience at Concordia was all the time I spent with my African and Caribbean associations. It enriched my entire experience. I learned so much about other cultures and engaged and so once I left, I felt like there was a bit of a missing piece. I'd run into some alumni that studied with me, but none of us engaged with the university in a meaningful way. So I felt like, okay, there's something there. We need to come together, build that community. So pulling from my own, I don't know how I see my mother bring people together or other people, just use that as the fuel to begin this. And then in deciding who to work with, really try and be mindful of different perspectives, different needs. We need people who know what they're doing in different sectors. So I think just kind of that holistic, I don't know if I want to call it that community, like looking at how my parents, for example, managed our family and our broader family relationships and did a lot of negotiation and sometimes conflict resolution and things like that. I think I'm able to easily pull those skills and just use them in leadership and in the work that I do.
If I could just build into what TDS said, it's interesting for me. I grew up in a household of a single mom with 5 siblings. So in the house alone, you get to learn how to be the judge, the jury, the leader, the negotiator, and everything in between. Especially when you're growing up in a house with a single mom, you are, without a doubt, you learn how to be a leader, right? And my mom, I've got to give shout outs to her. She's always told me to have absolutely zero fears. No matter what door you go into, no matter what room you get into, you belong, regardless of who tells you what, when, and how. You go out there and you actually make a voice for yourself. So our traditions, Somali women, if I could talk about it a little bit, we're actually leaders in our own homes. And I don't mean in the traditional, like a stay-at-home mom type of thing, but Somali women are actually known to govern their home financially. So if the husband works and they have...
Isn't it more of a matriarchal?
It is. It is. It absolutely is. So if the man goes out there to work or whatever, he actually brings the cash.
That's right.
Back home.
That's how
he brings
it is.
it to the woman, and she dictates how that money is used, obviously with the opinion of her husband, without a doubt, but it's the way that we're raised. So for me, in my culture, it's played a huge role into my leadership, and sometimes maybe I should have a little bit of fear, but I've got none in my bones.
No, what is fear? Where has fear gotten you?
Well,
it doesn't get you very far.
It doesn't.
So,
Sometimes you shy away from certain things, and
yeah, but it's really just because you're just scared to do the new thing, right?
I couldn't agree more.
Right, and
so be fearless.
Yeah, and I guess there's a reason why in Africa they say it takes a village. That's
Absolutely.
where it originates from, because
Absolutely.
I don't know how we got colonized. Like, I really don't, because
you know what? They wrote on a paper languages that we didn't speak, and it was extensive and what we currently call contracts. And eventually, they give you a certain timeline. You don't speak the language, can't find a translator, and off you go. Before you know it, they take your property. Okay. Unfortunately, there's a history behind it.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next question. So, how can we ensure that our cultural heritage is reflected in the way we build businesses and lead teams? Sabaa.
So, as an entrepreneur, I always think about how much control we have on the first decisions that we make. So when all this discussion about diversity came up, I'm like, I always hired who I wanted, so there was never a diversity problem in any company that I was building. When I think about, as the dominance of Nigerians worldwide, I think about
you guys are too much.
The assumption that we can make that we can go anywhere and do anything that we want because we will work hard and we will study and we will succeed. So that gets baked into how you start a company, and you start off with a very confident, forward-leading global stance. as a starting assumption on building a business. And that definitely ties directly to cultural heritage.
Anyone else have anything to add?
I would add just, I think also the culture, I guess, of hustling. Like, I think that there's not a lot of room for excuses, right? So I think about, I don't know, friends I've had who lost their job and did the things that people don't typically want to do, or looking at family members who have always consistently been hustling, whether it's doing door-to-door sales of, I don't know, those vitamins, or working the streets and just like making sure you find a way to make sure food's on the table that night. So working in markets or doing whatever hustle is needed that day. I think there's almost, for me, there's a sense of just not making excuses. I think people always find a way around it no matter what. And I think I bring that into my daily decision making, is there's no really excuse to chill.
Yeah, I remember when I built my business. I built Kinky Curly Yaki, which is an e-commerce business. I started it in 2012, and I built it into a multi-million-dollar business. Woo. Yay me! Yeah,
Congratulations.
I'm retired now. I'm living soft.
Yes.
I'm living soft life
Big fan
now.
of your brand, by the way.
But thank you. But one of the ways that my cultural heritage was always highlighted in my business is I always told the story how entrepreneurship wasn't a luxury. Like, I grew up not thinking that, I could just run out and be an entrepreneur. It was something that I just had to do. So I had a problem that I wanted to solve. I had the solution, and now I have to build this business. And I brought all that resilience into the business. And everyone I hired was Black, so I made it a point to always have my cultural heritage reflected. And Kinky Curly Yaki only carried kinky textures. So I was about that life.
If I can just build on what
Sure.
you're saying, just from a Somali community, in our culture, owning a business, it's part of who we are. Yeah. And just like what you're saying, right? So back home, everybody owns a shop. They own, whether it be a tea shop, whether it be a scarf company, whether it be a product of this, product of that. It's just what we know, who we are. So when we move and we go to the Diaspora, automatically the first thing they say is, okay, where can I buy a shop? Like, I need to open a tea shop, right? And so it's something that's critically normal to us. And I wanted to just say an African proverb, right? Just talking about passing this on to the next generation. There's a proverb that says, a child not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Right? So it's incredible and critical for us to really, be in these spaces. And this is why we are here, right? To make sure that we can pass on our knowledge to the next generation. Because if we don't embrace them, they'll find us somewhere else. So it is critical for us to really take what we have and ensure that the next generation benefits from what we do.
Yeah, we are starting. I mean, I think, how many of us are first generation, or first to come? Okay, well, basically everyone. Okay, how many second generations? Hey, nice.
There you go. Still immigrants. First ones came on the ship.
Okay, so the next question is, what challenges do you face when bringing cultural authenticity into professional spaces? Are we code switching? What are we doing here? How do you navigate bringing your cultural authenticity?
I'll start. So again, being a Somali Muslim for me, our team, I've got an operational team, and some of them obviously are Muslim, some of them are not. They attend Friday prayers. And so part of what we allow for them to do is take a particular hour of the day off, and they actually tend to stay and work a little later. So instead of finishing 5, they'll end up finishing like 6 or 7 p.m. And hopefully, as our company grows, we want to make sure we've got spaces where people could meditate, pray, or do whatever they want to do, right? To adapt that into the work experience. So that's all.
CD, have you ever had to compromise? Have you ever had to just become tea? Like, that's even a form of compromise, right?
Yeah, no, luckily never that. I think I love this expression. I don't know if it's Nair or Ahid or someone who says, give your daughters difficult names so that people have to learn to pronounce them, etc. So the name one I learned at a young age, but in terms of compromising, I would say that it's less compromising my cultural heritage and learning when to choose my battles, let's say. Yeah, so I think that I'm someone that it's very much at the forefront. I mean, I'm from Lesotho, as I mentioned, and being from a tiny little country, It's a big part of my identity, and I think even among other Africans, many people haven't heard of our country, or we're very much under the radar. So
for those of us, I know, but for maybe the people who don't know where it is, can you explain where it is on the map?
Yeah, sure. With pride.
Yes.
It's that tiny little. When you look at the map of South Africa, there are like 2 little dots in the country. Mm-hmm. So it's the only. It's the only country in the world that's landlocked by one other country. I think they say Vatican City, but it's a nation, not a city, not a country. But yeah, we're the only country in the world that's landlocked by another country, no access to the sea or anything like that. So it does put us in a different position. And I think for me, one major lesson from that was always, fighting for that identity and also fighting for being very vocal and having agency, because having come up surrounded by South Africa completely with apartheid, we were economically dependent, and just a lot of things in our country couldn't happen because of it. So I think for me, where I've had to compromise, it was more on, let's say, some of the racial issues that would happen at work and picking which battle was worth fighting versus when it's time to sort of, if you're the only, it's hard to fight the battle than if you have some allies. So yeah, I'd say it was more picking battles than having to compromise fully.
This question is especially for the women. Do you ever feel like you being authentic comes across as aggressive?
Oh. Sorry.
I know you know.
Okay. No, this is interesting. So for the past 10 plus years, I've actually owned my own businesses. So for the most part, when I speak up and speak out, if anybody sees it as aggressive, it's their problem, not mine, for one. But before I had my businesses, I had to be very careful as to how I speak, because I knew how they looked at Black women, right? If you have a voice or if you're loud, oh, you're aggressive. Again, being a Somali, I don't know how to take a step back. So
it's passion.
More than that. So I hold them. Actually, I hold them accountable. I say, I'm sorry, you think I'm aggressive? Why would you say that? You have to hold people accountable. And for the most part, this is a stigma they believe in, so you have to educate them. You have to let them know, I'm not aggressive, I'm passionate. And sometimes, yes, I am aggressive, but I've got a point, and that's okay, right? So it's
Sabaa.
important to know that. Passion, aggression, and woman, for the most part, hey, we're like, from what they believe, right? We're all the way at the bottom, so you got to make your voice heard.
Mm-hmm. Sabaa, what about you? You're a big Black man.
Ooh, scary.
So, there are a couple things about that. Every time I've run my own company, then I really haven't had to compromise.
Right.
And I've spent 85% of my career running my own companies. On that 15%, I had to learn something different. I don't think I appreciated when people were talking about having to code switch or come to work and not be their authentic selves. I didn't understand that at first. And now I appreciate it, but I think about some of the lessons I had running my own business where you are there to fend for yourself, and you have to walk into a room and be the dominant voice in the room. And you can't just be the dominant voice in the room. You have to have done your homework before you enter the room.
Right, it's exhausting.
So being organized and coherent
doing
in the
triple
delivery
the
of an idea, that works whether as an entrepreneur or in a large company.
Right.
Because if the stakes are always high because you have a short amount of time to establish your presence. And that comes with the voice, but being organized before you enter the room.
Being organized before we enter the room. People of chaos, we have to organize ourselves, okay? Okay, so another question. How do we ensure that our stories, traditions, and cultural nuances are passed down to future generations? Because I'm seeing a lot of, people eating fufu with spoons or forks. I don't want to eat with my hands, Mom, because macaroni and cheese or something. I don't know. So can anyone speak to how we can ensure that our stories and traditions and cultural nuances are passed down to future generations?
Sure, I can speak to that.
Sure.
I think for me, a lot of being in community and storytelling. I think, again, as someone who doesn't have a huge community here, I really find that I appreciate everyone else's cultures quite a bit, because it's just finding who you can engage with and who you can get together with and sort of share those common cultures. I think another piece is trying to surround your children or your, little cousins and everyone with family or with people that are from, their community or adjacent, to help them learn their culture. And then I think storytelling for me is really important in terms of documenting. You know, we have so many things that are not documented in our cultures in the past, and so we're seeing this great resurgence of storytelling, whether it's through fashion, through art, people writing, you know, cookbooks about our culture and really documenting traditional practices. So I think it's that constantly learning and baking it in as the parents or elders to make sure kids are engaged and they're able to see themselves and see the positivity from our various cultures.
Sabaa, I'm going to go to you. What role do you think technology has in passing down these traditions and nuances?
It's much easier. The documentation is completely different. So if I think of growing up, how many pictures I have of myself that document stories are very few, but my kids, literally, I can remind them of all these different nuances or interactions that they've had with my parents or with their cousins, because we have this constant technology documentation. But the other area that I think is emerging, and this has a lot to do with use of AI, is it's going to become much easier to make precise inquiries that are about your own past. Rather than the generic information out there, we actually can pursue knowledge with a level of precision. And the reason that's important is, if we don't, algorithms will average us out. So it's really important for us to use the tools and technology to reinforce our points of view, because that's part of training the models.
That's right.
And when we think about who we are in numbers, in terms of number of Nigerians, number of Africans, number of us other, we actually have a large enough number to influence algorithms. So there's an impact on technology.
But you know, I think as people, we're scared to educate the algorithm. I mean, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? Because either we teach it all of our, you know, our specifics and that sort of thing, or we're giving it too much information. Because, you know, I think as a people, we're just generally suspicious of everything, especially of the system, right? So how do you think we should counter that?
The stakes are high if we don't get engaged.
It's true. We'll get left behind.
We will be averaged out.
Yeah.
So more than ever, you know, if I think about the first technology wave where I digital from the beginning of my career, and often I would go into presentations and I'd be the only black person in the room. Now, in that era where everything became digital, I think it's dangerous now because digital didn't make decisions, AI makes decisions. So if we get left out of the process, if we don't lean in, if we don't engage, then decisions are going to be made for you.
Yep.
So the stakes are higher, we can't sit back and be passive in any way, and even with all the apprehensions, no choice but to lean in.
So please, we have enough shea butter businesses, okay? We need to start building AI, tech, something. Like I remember seeing this woman out of the States, and she's creating an AI, sort of like a chat or ChatGPT or Claude that is African-American based. Like it's got an African-American foundation. And so I think as Africans, I mean, we can divide and conquer. We got the North, we got the West, the East, and the South. We can get together and create our own Claude or Muna, ChatGPT, or Tseli, Tseli, ChatGPT, Sabaa, ChatGPT, or no, you know what I'm trying to say, .ai. But we should be creating these technology apps. We have enough shea butter, okay? We know. Okay.
If I could just mention another African proverb.
Yes.
There's one that says, the lion doesn't tell its story. If the lion doesn't tell its story, the hunter will. So basically, again, going back to ChatGPT and going back to training AI, we really, really need to put our voices, absolutely, and we need to have the generation speak up. You know, what's interesting, there is a lot of AI companies coming out of Africa right now. Shout out to Nigeria. You guys are really putting us on the map, which is incredible. Ghana as well. A couple of companies in Uganda. We're currently right now in talks to, you know, head sometime soon when things expand. For us here in Canada, we plan to head to Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria without a doubt, and Ghana. So Africa is where it's at. It's the new money. Very soon, in the next 10 plus years, guaranteed the new billionaires will come out of Africa.
Amen.
Without a doubt.
Mashallah.
Inshallah.
Okay, so next question. How do we reclaim our narratives as people of the African diaspora in a world that seeks to define us? Hey, Sabaa, you have something to say.
I do. So let's unpack the word reclaim. And when we are at the start of an era, we're actually at a point where we're not reclaim, we just have to claim it. So it's the same point, or it's a similar point I made before about the start of the digital era, but here we are at an inflection point where if we decide to make a decision and we claim it now, reclaim always is a catching up. Let's claim and move forward from this point.
The term sets us back.
So we're not reclaiming, we're claiming.
We're claiming. We're continuing.
We're continuing.
We're creating.
We're creating. That's what we're doing. What's a narrative from our culture that you would like to see changed? If anyone in the audience has something, you can. This is a great opportunity to speak up to.
I'll tell you something that I'm guilty of. Showing up late.
Oh.
I said it. I had to. I'm sorry. It is, I think if we show up, show off, and what have you, but on time.
So I have to counter that.
Please do.
I saw, I read somewhere, who am I kidding? It was a TikTok video. It was a TikTok video, and I can't remember exactly the name of the diagram, but what it did, it described different countries that have different, I wish I could remember. But basically, it's funny because the original diagram did not include any of the diaspora in there. If it did, I think it was just South Africa. And then the creator actually dug deeper and decided to create his own chart. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, please chime in. And basically what he was saying was a lot of African countries, Caribbean countries, because we value family and village, we have less, we're not timely people because we value sitting down and having a conversation, and we're not going to put a time on that. Whereas people that are from, say, Norway or the UK or any of those countries, they're like, no, time is money, therefore we're cold, therefore we need to get this done and over with.
Vivian, I want you to say it really loud for my husband right there. Who likes to hold me accountable for being late.
Oh,
we are
don't
a
do
people
that.
of community.
That's
we're
right.
family-based.
That's
so
right.
the reason why we're late. I'm going to use that. This is great. Thank you.
Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Sure. I mean, I think one that I'd like to add, because I know I'm guilty of it myself sometimes as well, is the narrative that Africa is harder or worse in some way. Because it's something that has been put on us. I think most people, I've had employers tell me, you must be so grateful you work here and not in Africa. And I'm just like, it's kind of a strange thing to say. And I've had a trip I took when I was working at the UN. I took a trip down to, I think my boss was on a 3-week mission through Southern Africa to show them sort of like the landscape, and we were working in climate and biodiversity. And I remember one of them leaning in and saying, be honest, are you a princess or a queen? And I was like, and it's just like for him, he couldn't imagine why I was so comfortable in my skin and in this space unless I was from like the upper echelons of society. So I think for me, one narrative is I see so many people who are from our generation looking to go back home, looking to this, but there's that pause because it's the idea that, as you were saying, not everything runs on time as we expect it to. You have to kind of deal with the, light challenges, power, little things happening. But I think that if we kind of, I feel like we sometimes act as if it's not hard here either.
Yeah, it's funny because whenever people from Ghana or Togo want to come here, and I'm like, listen, the life is different here. We work, we live to work, and there they work to live.
Yes.
And so whenever I say, I want to live a soft life is not here. Mm-mm. It's not here. In fact, whenever I go to Ghana, I am madame. I just sit down, I relax. It's just, I'm not saying it's easy, but it's just, it feels like there's just a weight off my shoulders. Yes. I can be me. I can be me.
24 hours.
24/7. I don't have to walk through the library and put on a mask and make sure I don't look like a scary black woman, right? Whereas there, it's like, hey, I am who I am. If you don't like it, that's not my problem, right? And although we do the same thing here, you can do that here. There's a price to pay sometimes for that.
It's interesting. My sister and my brother-in-law recently moved to Kenya.
Okay.
And they've been telling us every day, if not every hour, you guys have to move. My brother-in-law, mind you, is a French-Canadian white guy.
Okay.
Fell in love with Africa. He went there for a trip and told my sister to move. And us being a close family now. She's like, I don't want to move away from my family. He's like, just come now, they'll follow. So they moved to Kenya, and they absolutely love it. My nephew was a biracial young kid, grew up playing hockey here, plays ice hockey in Kenya every Saturday morning and Sunday morning. So to them, life got better.
Right.
They took their culture, the Canadian culture, they obviously have their Somali, they took it to Kenya, they're able to expand, and as they say, 24 hours is rather more blessing there than it is here.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more.
I always tell people, again, who are coming to Canada, and I say, listen, you're the first generation. Life is not going to be easy, but you're not doing this for you. You're doing it for the next generation.
Agreed.
And then hopefully that next generation can go back home and bring all the brain power, all the things and lessons learned, and bring it back home, and let's build Africa the way it should be.
I want to build on that. Just this idea of when we think about our parents' assumptions coming to this country and the baked-in assumption that they're building something for us and the next generation, think of the world today full of short-termism, and think of our assumptions about long-termism. To build things properly, it's actually been baked into how we were brought up. And so everyone else dealing with fragmentation, if we keep that long view and build steadily, and that long view, it's very easy. I think it's easier for some of us with kids because I say, I have a 25-year timeline because by the time my 16-year-old hits a certain point, I want the change to have happened. So that long view is something that I think we have to remind ourselves of, and it's something that we can work with to build proper structures and proper companies and proper frameworks.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, here's a heavy one. Here's a heavy one, because I know growing up this is, it was quite the interesting challenge, but in what ways can we unify our diasporic communities despite being spread across the globe? I say it's music. I know it sounds silly, but I remember growing up and hearing, going to, Ghana parties with the uncles and everything, and hearing Tiny Wine. And thinking that it was a Ghanaian high life song. And I know it sounds silly, but, doing things like that, introducing other diasporas into your household, I think would go across, would go very far in a lot of communities, I guess. Anyone else have anything to add? So the question was, in what ways can we unify our diasporic communities despite being spread across the globe?
So I have a bias, being a fintech owner, but I do think one of the ways to unify is to think about investment. Not everyone's going to be an entrepreneur, but we definitely want investors in our companies. And if we can keep a proportion of our investors coming from our own communities, that means we're building long-term wealth and intergenerational wealth and value. I also think about investing in terms of a way to unify us economically, saying, again, it's a long-term view, but if you think about companies or if you think about the diversification of the stock market, it sheds weak companies and it keeps growth companies. And all of us have high stakes on not being on the growth half. So if most of us can unify and become better managers of our money, better managers of investment, and build for the long term, again, it only takes one generation for that investment to pay off in terms of stability. And that kind of stability means we get to a point where we call our own shots.
If I can build on what Sabaa is saying, I'm glad you brought up the topic of investment. We're actually currently doing a campaign of fundraising for Hover. And obviously, if we're taking money from our accredited investors, we're looking at well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. But we wanted to make sure that our community take part in investing and owning part of our company. So I will share a link with you guys. It's called frontfunder.com/hover, HOVR. and to his point, he's absolutely right. It is important and critical for us to really invest into companies, especially with people you can call and that you can knock on their doors, people that look like you and me, and ask them, hey, how's my money doing? What are we up to, right? So at Hover right now, with our capital raise, if you look at the page, we're at 258,000 right now. You can invest as little as $250 or $100,000. You can call your grandmother, your mom, whoever else you want to call to get that money. But yeah, we're open. So you guys come on board, invest, own part of our company.
Yeah, if you're looking,
let's grow together.
Yeah, if you're looking to get into investment space, so you can put investor on your bio.
Yeah, and as my mother likes to say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So it takes a village.
Another African.
Yeah, so smart. Come on now, it's Diaspora African talk. You've got to bring in. Yeah. I do come from the land of the poets, if I may.
Oh.
So my mother would be rather shamed if I didn't have poetry in here. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, so next question is, how can young Black professionals embrace their heritage while navigating predominantly white corporate spaces? CD?
I'll give you that one. Honestly, I think it's using your heritage as a differentiator. Like, I think there are lots of things that that a person can bring to the workplace. Obviously, yeah, bring to the workplace and just bring, it's an interesting talking point. You bring a different perspective to the table. I think that most people that a lot of Africans are very plugged into what's happening globally in their own countries. Like, whenever I'm learning something, I'm constantly comparing it to what's happening in countries that I know of. How can I take this idea and grow it? So I think just that natural curiosity, but then, yeah, why not bring people in if they're cool TV shows, cool music, whatever from your culture, bring it into work. If there's a work potluck, play some of the music. For me, one of my hooks that I love using is the fact that we have snow in my country and we have ski resorts. I'm always inviting colleagues and whatever to say, if you guys want to ever take a trip, I'm your girl. I can advise you. Just bringing in that thing where you always want to be memorable, right? So whatever it is that can help you stand out, use it.
I always say, why fit in when you can stand out?
There you go.
You already stand out, so you might as well do it properly. You might as well put your whole ass into it.
I guess I can speak to that as well. Again, for the past 10 years, I've had my own businesses, so it's the opposite for us, more so, in a good way, right? We have incredible people, white people, Caucasians, whatever, that have been incredibly supportive, that are in our teams, and they're adaptive to what we do and how we work and within our culture. So for us, is a little the opposite.
Okay, so then let me rephrase. As an entrepreneur,
yeah,
when you show up in white spaces, like let's just say if you're going to, I don't know, some networking event or an accelerator or something like that, how do you embrace your heritage while navigating those spaces?
Well, for one, I stand out like a sore thumb because I look and dress different.
Right.
So that right there to them.
I mean, you don't put on the Patagonia and the...
You know what? Not all the time.
No?
Just in investor meetings, they're like, "Oh my God, are you a rich person from Dubai?" I'm like, "No, I don't have a sheik in my family, but my middle name is Sheik. My last name starts with Sheik." Now it's interesting because in investment spaces, sometimes, I'll be very honest, when we talk to investors, right, Caucasian investors, sometimes they're interested in who we are, which is great. And often, sometimes the questions that follow is like, well, tell me a little bit about what you went through.
It's like they're looking for that trauma story, the white savior complex.
Lucky
thing.
for them, some of us do have the trauma, if it sells, right? But I'm joking. But no, sometimes it's, they want to know the stories, and rightfully so. It is who we are. Some of the investors that we come across have probably never seen a struggle in their day, which is completely fine too, right? They're like, hey, I don't know how to relate to who you are or what you do, where you come from. Tell me about who you are. And that in itself, culturally, is teaching who we are. And it's critical that we do that in these spaces. Don't shy away from where you come from. Don't shy away from your struggles, who you are. That's why you're there. You were built to be that. And I promise you that I have not met somebody who's stronger than an African woman, guaranteed.
Always bring your full self to the table, that's 100%. For sure. Sabaa, what do you have to say?
So we have to remind ourselves that we have a lot of control. You're the beginning and the end of any story. So when I think about, we've talked about stories and the importance of that and what people are going to remember. In an investment space, it's interesting how many people have only worked in one country. And most of
Yes.
us come from 1 or 2 or 3 countries and are very experienced. And there's a dismissiveness. I've heard people complain to me that they're trying to get a job and someone will say to them, you don't have enough Canadian experience. And I remind them that we all have international experience. You know, I've worked in projects and teams in 12 countries. And so if someone is going to try and high-hand based on saying Canadian experience, they don't have international or global experience. But it's also point of view. So the moment we start the story with a stronger reference point about our point of view that is bigger than local, that's already the start of deciding how we want to frame a story and controlling the narrative.
If I can build on that, if you don't mind, I'm going to mention Hover again. So our drivers predominantly, as you guys know, are people of color, right? If you get into an Uber, you're either with somebody who's from Pakistan, Africa, you name it. 95%, I would assume, at least from what the conversations I've had with them, are educated people who in their homes were either surgeons, doctors, engineers, lawyers. And to Sabaa's point, they don't have enough Canadian experience. Right? So some of these people, when they come to this country, they're 50 years old, 45 years old, whatever have you, they have 2, 3 kids. Their option is one of two: feed your child or drive a vehicle, right? So when you get into these vehicles and when you're talking to these Hover drivers, because why would you take an Uber, obviously?
Because there's
right?
Hover.
Because of Hover, hello, you got to support your people.
H-O-V-R.
There you go. Talk to them, ask them about who they are, what they did back home, and they'll tell you. It'll surprise you, right? You might be in a vehicle with a surgeon. You might be in the vehicle with a doctor, right? A midwife, you name it. So again, to his point, unfortunately, some people when they come here, they don't have the Canadian experience, but they have an international experience. And I have a little quote where I say we might be local minority, but we're the global majority.
Aye. Poetry in motion. I have a follow-up question. So, how has your identity... Oh, no. Hold on a minute. Sorry, I skipped over that. How do you balance standing out as someone proud of their heritage with fitting into corporate culture? So, think back to when you did work at jobs, because how many people have jobs versus entrepreneur? Okay, so we're just a bunch of... Okay, if you have a job, there's nothing wrong with putting your hand up.
Hey, entrepreneurs work too. We're working 24 hours.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. But we have more control, right?
That's true.
Whereas in corporate spaces, you don't. So how do you feel, how do you balance it? So let's just say if someone comes up, hey, Mona. So, and I know your name's not Mona, but hey, Mona.
Dairy, Vivian, pronounce it right. It's Muna.
No. But hey, Mona. So tell me about your, how you got here. Like, how did you end up here? Like, those sorts of, those microaggressions. So then how can you, how did any of you manage those sorts of microaggressions in the workplace?
Act dumb.
Sorry?
I said act dumb. Ask them to elaborate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Play into it.
What is exactly
Yeah,
does that
just
mean?
like if someone asks you a question like, how did you get here? You tell them I flew here.
I took the subway.
Yeah. Is there something I didn't answer? People who dig in and they're just, but where are you from really?
Yeah.
I mean, again, it depends on the context.
Right.
If you don't want to talk about it, just ask them to elaborate. If it is a microaggression where you can sense something, usually if you ask someone to elaborate, it's like when someone tells an offensive joke, right? If you ask them to explain it, they'll back down, hopefully. I think that's the way to deal with it.
There's something I say to my mentees about picking their battles. And so, again, it's something that I didn't appreciate because I started off building companies. But when I see some of the mentees enter the space and I realize how little power they have. And so I can't automatically say to them, push back right away. But I do say to them, no one's going to give you a break. And I need you to start thinking about your leadership stance today. And I need you to start to develop your stance today. And if I can get them to start working on it 10 years earlier than I would have thought about it at that stage in my career, 10 years later, they're going to be much better equipped to deal with some of these aggressions in a space. And if you build a leadership or an executive mindset into how they approach their work, then we will have more of us in leadership and executive positions And that eliminates a whole bunch of the problems.
That is smart.
So I just think, again, short term over long term, and I need them to think about this medium to long term of what they need to achieve so that they don't have to deal with some of this nonsense.
So we have to start really thinking about the long term.
Absolutely.
As opposed to the short term.
Yeah. And if I could add to that, anybody in the corporate spaces, don't be afraid to ask for a higher position. And if you're talking to somebody, a lot of the people in leader positions, sometimes they're looking to open spaces, right, for people of color or just anybody with talent generally, right? So if you believe that you can do it, go out there and say, hey, listen, I want that manager position, or listen, I want to be the VP of this. Just put it out, see what happens, and give them a reason as to why you want to do that, right? A lot of us are held back sometimes, and we are scared, or we stay away from the fact that, oh, no, maybe we can't do it. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe I'm not the one. Why wouldn't you be the one?
Why not?
Why
I always
not?
ask myself, why not? What would Chad do?
Yeah,
What
so
would a mediocre white
just
guy
go
do?
out there, right? We come from empires, right? If you know your history, in Africa, you come from empires, you come from leaders. But unfortunately, right now, we're still asked the same question as, how did you get to where you are? Oh my God, we come from leaders. Are you kidding me? Some of us probably have families that are connected to royalty, right? So when you think of Mensa Musa and become it, act it, do it. Make a difference for yourself. And don't afraid to knock on the doors.
And
if somebody says no, just knock again.
Knock again. Knock somewhere else.
Till they say yes. That's how I would do it.
So we can't let the hunters continue to share their stories and win.
Don't let the hunter share your
Don't
story.
let the hunter share our
Be the
stories.
lion that shares them.
I also want to bring attention to, and I'm going to turn to you, you're also sometimes in spaces where you have the opportunity to learn a lot. So when you think about being in consulting and how many different businesses you're exposed to and help understand the extent, that is knowledge that you get to keep. And so when I think about short-term annoyances versus long-term gains, we had a brief conversation about some of the things that you're now able to think about doing because you've accumulated that knowledge.
Yeah, no, so that's why I think, your answer was much more diplomatic about how to manage these microaggressions, but I think that's part of the whole, sometimes, act dumb or just let them elaborate and just move on. Honestly, there's so many bigger battles that you're going to face within the workplace that sometimes, those microaggressions hurt. Don't get me wrong, I've dealt with many of them, but it's really about, just last week I had to call a friend and she was like, I'm worried you're focusing too much on this one issue when we know what your long-term goal is here. It was like, step outside of this one incident, let's focus on the long-term goal and just stick to whatever your North Star is, and that'll get you far.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we have to wrap up this conversation. Any last words? Muna? You don't have a quote? You don't have a...
I do, no. Well, no, I'm just going to repeat the ones that I previously said. If you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go together. Earlier I mentioned the investment. There's an investment opportunity for our people, for everybody, really. And when I think of our people, sometimes I'm now starting to think more of just like, it's not just people of color, but there are minorities when it comes to the economic spaces as well. And that could be a person that's white or an Asian or a Middle Eastern, whatever have you, right? So anybody that would like to make money or some sort of investment for themselves, we are open to take your investment. If you're interested, you can come and talk to us. We're more than welcome to let you know what we're doing. Follow us on socials. We're at ridehover.com. If you take a hover, tag us, please, so we can grow together. And more importantly, take a hover.
Yeah.
Be fierce.
CD, do you have anything else?
I think the last thing I'd like to add is it's kind of building off some of the things we talked about, but just collaboration. I think our greatest strength is in numbers, as you mentioned. For you Nigerians, you have major high numbers.
Big ups to Nigeria.
Exactly, always. But I think that what I'd like to say is collaborate. I think for me, the best thing about being in Canada has been just the wealth of knowledge from other Africans and other people in diaspora who are doing great things. There's a lot of us also trying to reinvent the wheel, which is not necessary. Mm-hmm. I can take an idea and learn from a peer who's working in Kenya and kind of work on how do we expand this to my country, or what can we do together. So I think there's a lot of knowledge that we already have within our community, and I think the collaboration piece is one that'll get us a lot further faster.
Okay, and Sabaa, last word, quickly, please.
I'm going to put a timeline in everyone's head.
Okay, let's do it.
McKinsey released a study that talked about how long it would take for Black people to achieve economic parity, and the number was 300 years.
Aye.
Last year at Davos, they said, how long will it take for women to achieve gender equality? And it hovers around 150 years.
It hovers, eh?
If you accept 150 or 300 years, that's your fault. If we decide that we're not going to accept a 300-year timeline, it means every decision that you make should be saying, I don't accept that timeline. Anyone who tries to hold you back is trying to get you to accept that timeline, and think about the timeline that you think is satisfying. And for me, it's 25 years because of the age of my kids. Keep that timeline in mind on every decision that you make. Do not accept the 300 years. Do not accept the 150 years.
That's remarkable. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, well, that's it for our conversation. Voices of the Diaspora. Thank you so much to everyone joining us, and hi to everyone online. What's up? Hope you guys were, I don't know, doing in your pajamas, doing things. But yes, thank you so much to all of you for dropping such insightful gems. And I wish you the best of luck and blessings and blessings and blessings. Nyama, 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 nyama.
Vivian. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you all.
Vivian, we thank you so much for all of you for sharing your wisdom and sharing your gems that about being a part of the diaspora. And I'm sure we're going to take home some really good messages from today. We'd just like to say thank you, and we have a few gifts for you guys. All right. And for everyone else, right now we have our pitch competition at 3 p.m., just starting upstairs on the main stage. So if everyone wants to make their way over there or go to the exhibit, it's up to you. But thank you for coming.